All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
And delighted deal out. Oh, please. I'm humbled and I'm encouraged and indeed supported. I'm buoyed by your recorded applause. It is a pleasure to be with you, especially with the big, beautiful Billionaire giveaway having passed the Senate, and we will discuss its future in the House. Also, we have a very big show today with David Cay Johnson, the Pulitzer Prize winner, in hour 2. And in hour 1, Nathan Taylor, he the celebrated election statistics questioner, who will be here with his latest. And you know, I think there's significant questions about the last election, and we'll see how those sort of generic questions take on a coherence when you actually look at the statistics. So glad you could be with us. Here we go, says Ron. Right on, Ron. What up to the East Coast? Shout out to my brothers and sisters. And how about on the West Coast? Yeah. And all around the world. Yeah. Kim is here. She is most
Kim, how are you?
fabulous. And Tony is here as well.
Thanks, Tony.
I wanted to recognize, before we get right into the ugly politics of the moment and the immigration controversies that now take on even uglier faces as they build these or set up these concentration camps, is what they are, for those who are waiting for deportation. I wanted to take a moment to recognize that over the last 24 hours, I want to take a look at who has passed. And when I know when we say passed, we're all thinking, oh, you mean the big bill that was in the... No, I mean passed away. And Jimmy Swaggart, and I didn't realize this, but Kim was a huge fan of Jimmy Swaggart, weren't you, Kim?
No, 100% no.
Oh, I might be a different Kim then. Swaggart is dead. Long live the next televangelist. The deal with Jimmy Swaggart is that he lived for a super long time, and during that time, he was able to amass quite a fortune. He was 90 years old.
Was he able to sucker people out of their money with abandon?
Well, when you put it that way, it
you just don't get it, do you? You don't.
I'm saying, Kim, you clearly haven't truly experienced the Lord's work as
sorry I cheated. Praise Jesus and send the money.
Yeah. Well, you know,
this is a word from the Lord, and he's not happy.
Okay, everybody, just settle down. Swaggart is gone. He, as Kim has mentioned, pretty much has faded into obscurity because of a sex scandal. But he had this, I think he was, look, it's open to interpretation what happened. He was with a hooker, got caught going out of a motel room, as I recall. Wasn't that it, Kim?
Something one like does. That. It happens, you know.
Yeah, that stuff can be easily misinterpreted, is all I'm trying to say.
You know, they do this to me all the time. I don't know what the hell they do it for.
I don't think we should jump to conclusions on Jimmy Swaggart. But, oh, wait a minute. He admitted that he had sinned against his Lord. Here's the video.
I have sinned against you, my Lord. And I would ask that your precious blood would wash and cleanse every stain until it is in the seas of God's forgetfulness.
Wow, that was pretty good. Yeah, you got to admit. Come on your feet for that performance. That was pretty terrific. And maybe those are words we should all say before we go to bed at night.
You know,
Jimmy Swaggart in the 80s, Kim, back when you were just much, much younger. and you were only dreaming of insulting great people like Jimmy Swaggart.
It's not the snorting cocaine off a hooker's behind mark that really bothers me, or whatever he did. It's the absolute hypocrisy, where you could stand up there and be so judgmental to other people and tell everyone else they're going to hell, and oh God this and God that, and send money.
Yeah.
Behind the scenes, you're the worst offender of them all, and then using God to get out of it.
Well, how else are you going to get out of it? I mean, I give him credit for that. I mean, you gotta come on. You've got Jesus Christ in your rear pocket. You got to whip it out once in a while. That's all I'm trying to say. But in his peak in the 1980s, Kim, Swaggart reached millions of viewers.
Yeah.
Both in the U.S. and more than 100 countries.
I stand corrected.
Yeah, his broadcasts generated revenue of $140 million a year.
There's
he
a
had
sucker
that
born
fire
every
and
minute.
brimstone thing. What's that?
There's a sucker born every minute.
Well, you know something, Kim? Clearly, I can see you're going to have to wait for the Lord's message to come through someone else. But he had both the fire and brimstone, and he was a singer. He was from a singing family. But his he called Catholicism a false cult, and he said a lot of controversial stuff. And then, as Kim has noted, he was really brought down effectively as a relevant figure in this world of, spiritual awakening and televangelism. He was brought down by that sex scandal. Anyway, he's dead now, so you can lay off him, Kim.
Is it too soon to say? Is it too soon to say? Sayonara, sucker.
Sayonara, sucker.
Oh, wow. It is a cold room, man.
Good day, sir.
Okay. All right. Enough. I also wanted to mention, Tony notes that is it the Marvel Universe?
Yeah.
The Marvel Universe, who have we lost, Tony?
The former editor-in-chief, Jim Shooter. He was
Shooter.
Basically he was behind everything from late 70s through most of the 80s, all those good comic runs were just all,
He
Because
wrote and drew
Stan left
stories
to do
featuring the
comic-
Legion of
the animated stuff.
Superheroes at 13. He sent them into DC Comics. Then got a phone call from the guy at DC Comics who wanted to purchase the stories that he had sent and commissioned him to write Supergirl and Superman stories. This is when he was 13.
Yeah, 13, 14, yeah.
Incredible. He eventually offered him a regular position, wanted him to become someone who was on the staff and come to New York to spend a couple of days in his office. He was 14 then at that point. Lived in Pittsburgh, had to wait until school was in recess. And then he went to New York with his mother. I mean, it's a pretty incredible story. And so he wrote for both Action Comics and Adventure Comics. At 14, this all happened. And then he went to NYU. He worked at Marvel. And then so he stopped working at DC Comics during that time, etc. And then he went on to, as you say, I guess DC and Marvel went through all kinds of different phases of realignment, right? Tony, you know more about this stuff than I do.
Well, it's just the 70s. They weren't doing so good, in the 70s and 80s. So he was part of bringing a more business acumen, going, this are your deadlines. I don't care. Get this stuff done. And so it just so a lot of artists didn't like him, but he brought that discipline and then the storylines too. He was very helped with a lot of those and stuff.
Apparently. I mean, really a gifted, remarkable guy. He worked as a consulting editor and freelance writer for some of these brands as he got older. Okay. But he was still super productive. And then he just has passed away. Esophageal cancer. Mm-hmm. So sad. It's like a young person. Again, this is someone who passes away at 73. 73 is young. And I feel like that's someone who was cheated out of a lot of life. Obviously a great creative force. Anyway, rest in peace to Jim Shooter.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Meantime, a remarkable fight was going on overnight in Washington. A fight over how do we get this billionaire giveaway bill done without everybody having to pay the price when it comes to their constituents, because a lot of these constituents in red states are on the business end of many of these cuts, particularly to Medicaid, as you know. So you end up with Vance breaking the tie in the Senate. So the ultimate count is 51-50. Isn't 51-50 also the code for
mental breakdown?
Yes, thank you. That's exactly.
Someone who is either going to harm themselves or others. Yeah. And needs to be restrained immediately.
Yeah. Looks like it's going to be themselves and others, as it turns out, because it's going to be the others part is, as I've mentioned, cuts to many of their constituents. And there are also various energy-related incentives and energy-related policies that were wedged into this bill as well. And so the extent of fossil fuel damage that you've already seen in America, the extent to which you breathe air that is polluted, that's all getting worse, as you know. And even in this bill, the attempts to even address that in a monetary way, those attempts have been rolled back. So those things that you found in the Biden administration, you just will see them quickly rolled back. They've already rolled back a lot of stuff, I know, at the EPA, but as a tree hugger, I pay attention to that. The human cost is manifest, right? A lot of people who were getting Medicaid and going to get Medicaid, they're going to find that drying up. And so all the things we talked about with rural hospitals that are funded essentially by Medicaid money, it's not that everybody who goes to the hospital is on Medicaid, but the idea is that the hospital gets sufficient money out of that pot to stay open for everybody. So rural hospitals demand a real connection to government money. Now that government money is getting cut off, and that will affect the, it'll affect the constituencies of red states quite prominently. I will say this, Donald Trump, and I watched a lot of stuff this morning, he was doing a roundtable thing. He's already, when asked about the Medicaid thing, he's tagging it on the Democrats. He's saying the Democrats are the ones that are the reason that it is threatened. I will never hurt it. If it is defunded, it's the Democrats. He's already starting the disinformation. As you know, it's quite effective. So you can say, well, aren't those MAGA people going to realize that they've made a terrible mistake as they lose their government services? They lose SNAP, they lose Medicaid. They're going to realize they've lost it, but if you're a low information voter and you just handle what's coming out of the propaganda machine, you may very well think it's the Democrats that are the reason that you're losing it. I mean, we're in a weird universe now, but in any case, the Senate does pass the spending bill. It now goes back to the House. Here is Donald Trump at this Mar-a-Lago thing today, which was really designed not so much for the bill, although this huge bill, it affects not only billionaires getting a huge tax break, but it also affects immigration monies. That you saw the amount of money that's going to Department of Homeland Security, which is already a bloated, massive government agency that is being run by someone who is a vacuous poser, Kristi Noem. The amount of money being directed to that now is well in excess of anything that would have even been considered reasonable in the past. But with these redoubling of immigration efforts and these buildings of these, again, they're concentration camps, they're facilities where all these detainees will be detained. There's a new face on America, frankly. And so Trump was talking about the latter, about this. So what does he call it down there, Kim?
Alligator Alcatraz. And did you hear they're selling merch ahead of Alligator Alcatraz's opening? If that isn't the most insensitive thing.
Yeah, I mean,
here's where your loved one is incarcerated and waiting deportation. Want a sweatshirt for $20? I mean, what, really?
Right. I mean, Kim is right about this. It's just, it's loathsome. I mean, I'd call it tone deaf, but tone deaf is polite. It's like, really, it's a celebration of a monstrosity, All right. Here he is this morning, and this is just a few hours ago, Mar-a-Lago.
Thank you, Mr. President. Given the likelihood of the one big beautiful bill passing, and we look forward to the success of this facility here, how many more facilities like this do you feel that the country needs in order to enact your agenda of mass deportations?
Well, I think we'd like to see them in many states, really, many states. This one, I know Ron's doing a second one, at least a second one, and probably a couple of more.
Ron DeSantis.
And, you know, at some point, they might morph into a system where you're going to keep it for a long time. You know, it's not that far away from jails that take years to build. And money is spent and wasted, and, you know, like the railway that they have in California that costs like 40 times more than it was supposed to cost. The same things happens with prisons. You look at this in a short period of time, Ron, James, and some of the people that really worked on it along with our people, they did this in less than a week. And you look at it, it's incredible. The incredible thing is picking the site, because the site was one of the most natural sites. It might be as good as the real Alcatraz site. You know, it could be. Well, that's a spooky one too, isn't it? That's a tough site. But so I think it could last as long as they want to have it. I mean, you may morph this into, you know, your prison system, frankly, which I know you always need, unfortunately. I'd like to say, you know, a little controversial, but I couldn't care less. We have a lot of bad criminals that came into this country, and they came in stupidly. It was an unforced error. It was an incompetent president that allowed it to happen. It was an order pen maybe that allowed it to happen. And it did happen. But we also have a lot of bad people that have been here for a long time. People that whack people over the head with a baseball bat from behind when they're not looking and kill them. People that knife you when you're walking down the street. They're not new to our country. They're old to our country. Many of them were born in our country. I think we got to get them the hell out of here too. You want to know the truth. So maybe that'll be the next job that we'll work on together. But
so there you go. That's a little bit of Trump taking a victory lap on getting this Alligator Alcatraz up with the associated merch that, as Kim says, they've already come up with merch. It's wild that they come up with policies, but there it is, the merch. We're showing it to you now. Their T-shirts, their hats, their water bottles. How appropriate that they would be water bottles, since the people inside won't be getting water for 24 hours at a time. You know what I mean? Sort of an irony to that, isn't it?
This is the ugliness of America. It's so embarrassing. I'm so embarrassed by this.
Well, if you're embarrassed by this, I'm guessing you're not going to be a candidate to get the hottest Christmas item going for your loved one. That is the Trump cologne. Yeah. He's also pushing that. He's got, this is not easy.
What does that smell like? The smell of money? What is that?
He's got the smell of bankruptcy.
Oh.
Trump fragrances are here, he announces. They're called Victory 4547 because they're all about winning, strength, and success for men and women. Oh, good news for you, Kim.
Girl, you just woo.
Yeah. Get yourself a bottle, he says.
Girl, you just woo.
Okay, and don't forget to get one for your loved ones, too. Enjoy, have fun, and keep winning. Go to gettrumpfragrances.com/whatever, and he posts that. We're showing it to you now on YouTube. If you're just listening, I'll just describe. There's a, looks like a gold little almost statuette of Donald Trump on top of this.
It's almost like a Trump Oscarette.
Yeah, it really is. I think it looked kind of cool. Sadly, it's not priced to move, I don't think. It's $200 is what I saw. Maybe it's north of 200.
If you really love Trump, you'll fork out the cash, Mark.
Listen, it's the thing to complete the set, Kim. If you have the meme coin, if you have the assassination sneakers, if you have the MAGA hat, if you have the other MAGA hat, and then the third MAGA hat, then you have the black MAGA hat like Elon Musk used to wear, then you need to wear the fragrance, the Trump Victory fragrance. Oh, look at that. We'll get you into a fragrance for $199. And then there is a different one of the line that's $249. And we're showing you all of this on YouTube now. And listen, this is what you want to do. That's buy and save is what they're saying. And that's my favorite way to buy if I'm saving. And so we remind you that it's out there. I mean, this is a guy who does a lot, Kim. You can make fun, but he orders an historic bombing of an Iran nuclear site. He's in touch with world leaders. He is setting up these deportation camps on every street corner. He's aggressively going after the toxic influence that these construction workers, day workers, and fruit salespeople and agricultural workers represent to our culture. He's getting rid of all of them, Kim, and he has time to launch a new fragrance, which is, I'm saying,
Kimberly says it smells like.
I love Tesla.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Now he doesn't have to push Tesla anymore. So he's.
I love Tesla.
Yeah, okay.
Murphy says that is definitely not the silhouette of Trump.
It's a young Trump, Murphy.
Is that what
it's
it
a
is?
Younger Trump. The other thing I wanted to mention, because I think it is of significance and it is relevant to the passing of that billionaire money grab that just passed the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the Trump-Musk showdown. It's real. And at one time, as you know, and I will own it, I thought there would be kind of a rapprochement or them getting back together in some way. I just felt two huge forces had too much at stake for this hostility to continue. But what happened was the real power was with Musk and his money and his social media platform and Starlink. And we may get to Starlink as we talk to Nathan about the election in a few minutes. But that was dumped into the campaign and it helped propel Donald Trump into the presidency. Once Donald Trump is president, the power shift now goes the other way. Donald Trump has all the power. Donald Trump can control government contracts and government obligations and incentives, incentives in particular, that really make Elon Musk healthy. There is every bit of evidence that without government subsidies, Elon Musk is dealing with a company that's in real trouble in Tesla. Not because of anything that just recently happened. I'm just saying in general, the thing that has really gotten them financially healthy, Tesla, is government contracts. And so even as they announced the first driverless car that was delivered to someone, et cetera, they need government contracts to help make it going. Now, I don't mean to say government doesn't need Elon Musk. He does have control of Starlink, which is a critical way that broadband service is brought to much of the world and much of the U.S. And he's even picked up some additional contracts during the time that he was doging, dismantling, and in this self-serving way going through government. But Trump can trim all of that back, and now he's actually saying he could trim all of that back, and he's saying it to the press.
He's upset that he's losing his EV mandate, and he's he's very upset about things, but he could lose a lot more than that. I can tell you right now. Hey, Elon can lose a lot more than that. I don't know. I think we'll have to take a look. We might have to put Doge on Elon. You know what Doge is? Doge is the monster that might have to go back and eat Elon. Wouldn't that be terrible?
Wow.
That would be the poetic justice, and it would be very much on brand for Trump to turn the creation of Musk on Musk. And the way it would be done, because Doge is all fake. Doge is a bunch of guys who go in, 19-year-olds like that guy who calls himself Big Balls. He goes into the EPA, goes into USAID, goes into the IRS, et cetera, with all of his minions who are in that demographic, 19 to 26, whatever. They go in and they basically scrape all of those computers for data on us. And the dismantling has nothing to do with efficiency, as you are aware. We've detailed many times the waste, fraud, and abuse is the flag they fly. But the reality is they're just dumping staffers, and then they're having to rehire them. They're scrambling to rehire many of the staffers who turn out to be integral to the running of this country. So anyway, cut to this. He can just say, we realized that there were a lot of wasteful contracts around Elon's stuff, and so we decided to terminate them. And we just did it through Doge. So it's a weird irony that Doge is there, blah, 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 blah. Doge turns on its creator, But it seems incredible to me, but this battle with Musk is real, and I don't know if it. I'm just looking at that. The city of Miami canceled its elections. What is that?
Yeah, I didn't mean to just derail you. I found this interesting. Deidre wants to know if we've mentioned that the city of Miami canceled its elections this year, extending the term by a year when their terms were set to expire this year. So basically, they give themselves an extra year in office. I had to look it up. She's right. They did that.
They did it, or they're proposing it?
They voted to do it.
Oh, wow.
Even though the Florida Attorney General said,
that's what I thought. The Florida
Attorney
General
might not be
said
so
no.
legal.
Yeah.
And they still voted to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it when they say, well, the citizens of Miami deserve or are entitled to make this decision. Well, then let's let them make it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned elections, though. Thank you. I don't know what I was saying before, but it's probably not that important. But
Musk, Trump,
I was talking about the fact that Musk, he's right. When Trump says that Musk wants those EV credits, he wants a lot of other credits that are associated with alternative energy. And let me just say this on that. This bill is a kill shot to environmental stuff. It's unbelievable to me. But they're really going after alternative energy. So all of the incentives associated with alternative energy, solar, wind, don't look for them from the United States government. And we are going to be also rans. We're about dirty energy now. That's what this country increasingly is. It's the old line, don't tell me what your priorities are, show me your budget, and I'll tell you what your priorities are. And in this case, if you look, you can see they deliberately made cuts, and they made the cuts to pay for the billionaire tax breaks. So that's the latest. And again, the good and the bad of it. And sadly, it's mostly bad.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I don't want to wait any longer on something that is of great interest to many, myself included. It's the legitimacy of our elections. And, we talk about the legitimacy of the elections, and I think we think traditionally of the good old voter suppression way that things are done in the South. Georgia's taken it to high art. Greg Palast, who's I think coming by the show next week, is going to be detailing all the ways in which tens of thousands of voters are taken off the rolls and prevented from their voice being heard. But Nathan Taylor at Election Truth Alliance has a statistical background. So he looks at the statistics as they come in, and the statistics on voting, the statistics on demographics, and when there are irregularities, he points them out. So we had him in, I think Nathan's been here twice before, and let the third time be a charm, from the Election Truth Alliance. How about it for Nathan Taylor?
Hello. Yeah, thanks for having me again.
Yeah.
Happy to be here.
Really, really cool. So I always feel like the best thing I can do is to get out of your way, and you can sort of share what things you have seen, what new revelations or discoveries there might be. And then I do have a question. At some point, I'd like to, in our limited time, get to the court case in New York. And if you saw anything in those Rockland returns that sort of reinforced or shed light on stuff that you were already thinking about. Yeah.
I'm happy you mentioned that, because I actually included that in the PowerPoint today. I will talk a little bit about Rockland and that lawsuit. But kind of before we jump into things, I think a few things you said were important. And this is kind of what we're talking about now. So as we said, the ETA, we're looking at elections. We're looking at statistical analysis. We're working with election experts across the country and in Europe as well. And what's important here is, why do we care about our elections? And there's this little term we hear, and we're probably going to say this more often, but our democracy is based on the consent of the governed, right? We elect people to represent us. And so our election should be the most important thing that we do in our country, because it gives power to those who have our consent. So as we jump into the data, let's really dive into, are there concerns with this last election and upcoming elections as well? So we have a PowerPoint for you. I think you can pull it up for me. We'll keep this very simple. I only have 20 slides, but I'm not going to use all 20 slides. I cut it down from a little more than that. But
I love when you say only have 20 slides.
Yeah. It's
no, I love this about you. You come with the math. There's just a lot of it. All right, here we go.
Yep.
And I may describe it to people who are only listening. So
we'll describe it. We'll keep this very big picture for you. I only have a few graphs this time. I know last time we were pretty heavy. So as you know, who am I? I am Nathan Taylor. I am one of the co-founders of the Election Truth Alliance. I am currently one of the executive directors. And so I go and I talk about the data that we publish. We have new reports coming out soon for North Carolina, but we're going to talk about it in this PowerPoint as well. We've made reports about Pennsylvania and Nevada. So we will jump right in. Here's your overview slide. I'm not going to really cover all of this, but I'm going to talk about one thing important, and that's going to be the common theme for our concerns during this. And that is this third bullet here, which is 70% of the US uses a few major voting systems, voting brands. And what we're going to show you is we're going to ask the question as we look at the statistical data, what machines are they using in these places where we're finding these problems?
And I'll just mention that what this slide also notes, again, just for people who are listening, is that in the election, there were over 200 bomb threats on election day, particularly in swing states, it's noted. Also, all 7 of those swing states were won by one party and all outside the recount margins. And then you get to the voting equipment to which Nathan is referring. And you can touch on this last point, I think.
Right.
All 88 counties. Go ahead.
Yeah. So in this election, there were 88 counties that changed voting demographics. So they went from, in this case, what was originally pro-Democrat, 88 counties pro-Democrat, changed to pro-Republican. The voting shifted, but none the other way around. This hasn't happened since the 1930s when I think it was Ronald Reagan won in a absolute landslide. So it's weird to see that. Given
it wasn't Ronald Reagan in the 1930s, but yeah, okay, go ahead.
Okay, well, I wasn't. You might.
No, but that's okay. I just wanted to. But your point is taken. I just want to make sure that got right. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, thank you. Yeah, catch me on things. Now, let's talk a little bit about just the 70% of voting equipment. So here's your map. Here's 2 major brands. I think we've covered this
70% of the voting equipment was compromised is how this is headed.
Yes. And so there was a group of cybersecurity experts. They wrote a letter. I believe Free Speech for People published it. And they were talking about the major brands being not only potentially compromised in past investigations, talking about like the machine images and some other systems. But what's really important here is we're saying, although these could be vulnerable, what's interesting is they are used across 70% of the US, these major brands. There's 3 major brands as well, but 2 of them really take a majority of the US. And what we're going to highlight is, for example, the leading brand, which we don't talk about and say, but they have been found that some of their tabulation machines do have cellular modems in them, the leading brand in the US. And they do cover portions of the states we're going to talk about, from Pennsylvania to North Carolina. And so
Can
what's
I just
important?
follow up with a quick question on your title, 70% of voting equipment compromised. Just speak to that. What is the evidence that 70% of the voting equipment was compromised?
Yes. So these 2 major brands, during lawsuits post the 2020 election, there were multiple lawsuits that actually led to investigations into the machines. These 2 major brands could have been compromised during these investigations. The source code for their machines could have been made public. There were some people who actually faced some criminal penalties for it. And so Free Speech for People does talk about it. They have that letter the cybersecurity experts released back in 2024. And what's important is they talked about those images being compromised could allow bad actors to go forward in the future and mess with this equipment and make changes or potentially compromise people's votes. And what's important is these vulnerabilities, from our understanding, haven't been addressed yet. These machines could still be vulnerable.
Because you're talking about at minimum, these machines, some of them were seized, so the workings, the data, the coding of these machines now is known. And
yes, and the administrative access is potentially known to these machines as well, which could be used to compromise or make changes to these machines maliciously going forward? Good questions.
Okay.
All right. So now we're going to jump into what you wanted to hear about. In this case, this is Rockland County, New York. I like how my slideshow always gets a little fuzzy here, but no worries. So on the right is a image. This is Rockland County as a whole. They're broken up into, in this case, school districts just to show these different areas. But there, as you said, is a lawsuit in Rockland County, New York, where they do use the #1 machine brand in the U.S. that we've highlighted in smart elections. Well, smart legislation, which is their legal action arm. They are suing. They sued, and they are currently in litigation with Rockland County. Why? They have found concerns of anomalies, but what really takes the cake for them is that they have sworn affidavits from voters that voted third party, and those third party votes do not show up in the precincts that they voted in. On top of that, Smart Elections has put out a analysis of the drop-off voting or the down ballot difference, showing, in this case, Harris, candidate Harris, getting a significant lack of votes when compared to the Democrats in those areas. And what's important here is that drop-off that they're seeing in Rockland County. We are seeing the same drop-off all across the swing states, in places where there are other anomalies. And we're actually going to kind of highlight some of those drop-off anomalies in North Carolina and Pennsylvania. But what's additionally important here is not only did they have their first lawsuit and it went to discovery, but now they have I think September 22nd is when they are having a follow-up. They've already put in requests for information from the county, and they passed the test, if you will, for dismissal. So this is really important because they are pushing for audits. They are pushing for recounts.
Right, which is what we've been asking for since the very beginning. Randy asks, what is a drop-off?
Yep.
Quickly, you can address that.
Yep. Any other questions on this slide? And I'll show you what a drop-off is. Any other concerns here?
The only thing I would say about this slide isn't a question, but it's just to buttress the fact that this is very important because what you're describing is sort of the method by which you'd have all of these down-ballot Democratic votes not reflected in the top of ticket. That is to say, the vote for Harris wasn't there, even as there are votes for all these other Democratic candidates. So it's an odd thing. There's no vote for Trump, but there's no, at least in the Rockland stuff that I saw, there's no vote at all top of ticket.
So it depends where you look. I will say there are some Hasidic communities in Ramapo, Rockland, New York, and so they do seem to vote in a block. But what's important here is we are seeing that drop off where the Democratic senator is getting like 90% of some of these votes, but then there's 0 votes or only a handful of votes for Harris, and it flips to Trump winning at the top of the ticket. And this is happening all across the county, not just in those Hasidic communities.
Yeah, the Hasidic community is a Trump community. So just to be fair, I think that he's found a lot of support among the Hasids. That's been, I think, associated with Israel policy or something like that. But continue on, please. I don't want to, the sand in the hourglass is running. So go ahead.
And so we did visualize that. We asked about drop-off. Before we get to drop-off, I'm going to show you, we did do statistical analysis of Rockland County, New York. And what's important here is this is a bar graph for you. The way you read this on the x-axis is this is turnout. How many people showed up to vote? So, for example, this is by precincts. So if you got a precinct, there's 100 people who could vote. 50 show up. That's 50% turnout. So what we're showing is, in this case, this is all vote types. And we're looking at precincts where only, if I can make it a little bigger here, I think we're sitting closer to 40% turnout at the low end of these precincts, up to 84% at the high end. And what we're showing you is this is based off the work of election experts in Europe, such as Roman Udot and Sergei Shvilkin, who they talk about if you were to manipulate elections by digitally stuffing or deleting votes, you would create an effect where turnout would rise and a candidate would begin to benefit from that increase in turnout. And in this case, when we're looking at Rockland, New York, we do see that at lower turnout precincts, in the first 45% turnout, we're seeing that this is an average of all precincts, by the way, across the county. So we're seeing in all precincts, on average, of lower turnout, Harris is winning with close to 60% of the votes. And then what we see is in precincts of higher turnout, as that increases, where you go to 45, 50, 55, all the way up to 84% turnout, Trump begins to excel in the amount of votes he's getting. And this is very interesting because we see this effect in Pennsylvania. We see this effect in Nevada. We see this effect in North Carolina. And I'll show you now as we go into the drop-off, as we go into the actual statistical analysis and the big picture, we have hard numbers of how many votes it would potentially have impacted in some of these swing states. And would that be enough to change the outcome of those states and the election as a whole?
That's so we're moving on to the swing states is your point.
We are. And I mean, any other questions here besides the drop-off? And I'll explain drop-off with another slide to show them. I didn't put up the New York drop-off, but it's the same concern where you'll see one candidate is sitting very heavily above the 0% line. So drop-off is just a measurement. We're saying,
and what I was saying before is this is the method. If you were to, this is the phenomenon, might be a better word. This is the phenomenon noticed in New York, and now you're going to show it to us in the swing states.
Yeah, yes, I will. So here's these other swing states I talked about, and so I do have some numbers for their drop-off. But what is drop-off? I like to call it down ballot difference because it makes a little more sense. It's the difference between the presidential race and a down ballot race, such as senator, such as superintendent, like what we're going to look at in North Carolina. So drop-off is just how many votes did the president get for their party versus how many votes did the senator get. And what's interesting here is when we look at past elections and we look at the average outside of the swing states, the presidential race normally gets 1% to 2% more votes than their down ballot party. That's normal. We see that in 2016. We see that in some of these non-swing states in the 24 election. And so what's important here is the 2024 presidential election is showing in the swing states and some non-swing states that noticeable change where Kamala Harris, in this case, is underperforming her party, her senators, her down ballot candidates. And this is strange. This is an anomaly. This is what they highlighted in New York on top of their affidavits. And this is what we began to highlight across the country. And then we also have statistical analysis to show it more cleanly. So here it is in these other swing states. For example, as I said, we're seeing the same trends of that down ballot difference in Pennsylvania, in North Carolina. And then we did some of the math before we actually did the statistical analysis. So in North Carolina alone, Harris was getting roughly 122,000 less votes than her superintendent candidate, which is Maurice Green. And yet on the other end, Trump is receiving around 191,000 more votes. This is interesting because, as we'll show you here, it's the consistency across the state. And we'll go back to 2016, but for example, in North Carolina, what does this graph show? It shows on the bottom, every county in North Carolina. And what we're seeing is this 0% line. So we have a bar graph, in this case, line charts, and we have two colors. We have a blue and a red/orange line. Blue is the Democrats, red/orange is the Republicans. And the 0% line is how many votes the down ballot candidate got. In this case, it's the superintendent. And so we're showing if you're above the line, you got more votes than them. If you're below the line, you got less votes. And so what we're showing here as we dive into some of the anomalies is we are seeing across the entire state of North Carolina, Harris is getting less votes in every county than the superintendent for her party. On the flip side, Trump is getting more votes than his candidate, which it could be more normal. 1% to 2% is what we should see. So why is Harris getting so little votes compared to her party? Any thoughts here?
I mean, I was going to say she could just be a troubled candidate. I mean, from a national perspective, she may simply have lacked the heft to get this sort of support, especially in a state like North Carolina.
Right. She could be unpopular. But what's important is, let's look at 2016. A candidate that also lost to Donald Trump during the 2016 election. This would be Hillary Clinton for the Democrats. And even then, even though in that case she lost as well, and some could say was an unpopular candidate depending on the times, we're seeing what we would argue is a more normal voting pattern, where across all of the counties of North Carolina, both candidates are getting on average 1% to 2% more votes, depending on location. And so this is what's important, is if this is what a more normal election looks like, then when we look at the down ballot difference in North Carolina for the 24 election, in New York for the Rockland County votes, we see that this pattern here in 2024 is not reflective of human voting behavior. It is too consistent from county to county.
Sure. Some county is going to go the other way. I mean,
It should.
with the Hillary 2016 stats that you just put up, you could see Hillary won some, Trump won others. It was more representative of, as you say, kind of the texture of an election, a normal election.
The chaos of humans voting. And so I just highlight this to show that if this is caused by a compromise of the tabulation machines, for example, as we dive deeper, if this is caused by the tabulation machines being compromised, we're seeing this across the swing states. We're seeing this in Pennsylvania. We're seeing this in New York. We're seeing this in California as well. And so this is the last drop-off slide I'll do, and then I'll kind of sum up a few slides for you. But we dove deeper. If this is caused by a compromise of the tabulation machines, and you are for example, deleting votes for a candidate or changing votes for a candidate, it would create this effect. And what's interesting is we don't see this effect in Pennsylvania for their mail-in voting. This is all of Pennsylvania, by the way, all of the counties. We see this effect in Election Day for Pennsylvania. And so I think that's important as well, as we're seeing the same significant underperformance for Harris for mostly Election Day. And that's where we're seeing so much of the votes benefiting Trump as well.
Well, Pennsylvania is a great example because it just seemed to be an extraordinary outcome,
including the bomb threats, over 30 bomb threats on election night in Pennsylvania alone. And we will be putting out a few more reports as we go forward with some other discrepancies we found in Pennsylvania. But let's talk hard numbers. If you're ready, let's talk hard numbers. Let's talk some real statistics.
Okay.
All right. So here we go.
Didi says, prove it. I need solid evidence.
Solid evidence.
All right, here we go.
All right, here we go. And we've got a few minutes. So if you're not familiar, and I know my slides like to be a little wild here, but let's talk about Dr. Walter Mebane. He is, in my opinion, one of the leading U.S. election fraud experts. He's been cited by USAID, which got doged, as you would say. He's been cited by the government for European elections. But what's important is he is a University of Michigan professor in the Department of Statistics and Political Science. He has made his own model for election fraud detection, and he has used it and applied it for multiple elections throughout the years. He's highlighted back in 2009 some of the election fraud that went on to, support concerns in Europe and Africa and some other places as well. So he is probably one of the most credible or one of the most experienced and most well-respected election fraud experts in the U.S. And so he has applied his work, his model, his statistical analysis to not only Pennsylvania, but also to North Carolina. We've not released the North Carolina Dr. Walter Mebane paper yet. We've talked about it. It'll come up when we release the North Carolina report for the Election Truth Alliance. It'll be on our website. But we have released, and he has put up on his website, Dr. Walter Mebane, his Pennsylvania analysis. And so if you're familiar with the work we did in Pennsylvania, we highlighted 3 counties there that were showing significant irregularities that could be correlated with election fraud. And he did some of the math using his model. And so his paper that he published, it's up on his website, it highlights up to 210,000 anomalous votes. The margin of victory in the state of Pennsylvania is around 120,000. So
and when you say anomalous, outside the statistical ordinary range, or these anomalous along the lines of what you were just describing as anomalies in prior slides?
Yep. And so what he does is he quantifies them in different categories.
Okay.
But anomalous votes for him in some of these higher ranges could be malevolent distortions of voting. So that means a bad faith actor has come in and messed with the votes in some way. So he does give a little bit more of a quantified amount. There's a lower and a high end. But if that 210,000 votes is caused by manipulation, caused by a compromise of the machines or whatever, that would be enough to change the results of the presidential race in Pennsylvania. And so he applied the same analysis to North Carolina's data, and we mirror his concerns as well. We have our own analysis of linear regression, and our numbers are generally coming in around the same range. So in North Carolina, his working paper, which has not been released publicly yet, his model estimates up to 207,000 or so anomalous, potentially fraudulent votes. And he does quantify high confidence being at least 102,000. The margin of victory in North Carolina is around 184,000 votes. And so his high end and our analysis, which is around 198,000, that would be enough to change the outcome of North Carolina's presidential election as well.
Sure.
And so we do visualize it, but I think as we run out of time here, what we'll show then is we've applied the same analysis to other states as well. And so this heat map just shows, based off the work of Peter Klimek, what does a anomalous or what does a manipulated election potentially look like? And so in the US, we show it should be more of a circle. So this is a nonpartisan race in Ohio. This is their state board district 5. It's a circle. We see the same, and this is measuring turnout. So that's how you measure it, is it's all precincts put together for a county or a race in a state, and it's just turnout. And then this is showing the winning candidate, which in this case, it's a nonpartisan race. We do the same thing for Erie County, Pennsylvania. They're mail-in. Remember, we talked about mail-in looking more normal. We see it's that more normal circle of a heat map. But then as we jump into election day for Pennsylvania, Erie County, we are seeing a significant shift across all precincts, benefiting the Republican candidates at higher turnout. The same thing that we're seeing in European elections that have been highlighted for election fraud. So we see that in Erie County. Just to be
clear, like if you were looking to put sort of a routine explanation on that, you go, well, live voter turnout and balloting is just skewed toward Trump, and that's just the way it was. They showed up at the ballot box.
Right. Well, so the problem with that is, even if a candidate is overwhelmingly popular, you shouldn't see a consistent trend across precincts, right? Every precinct's going to vote one way. You're going to get an average. So if a candidate is very popular, they're going to average 80%. But there's still going to be precincts of higher votes and less votes.
Of course, it would be still statistically anomalous, which is what you've kind of led up to this point with. I was just throwing that out there so that you could knock it down. Go ahead, Nathan. Sorry.
Yeah, what's important here is this is, as I said, the entire county, Erie County, every precinct in the county. And we are seeing across all precincts, in precincts of higher turnout, the Republicans are always benefiting. That's improbable. Statistically and normally, people don't or can't vote that way. You can't, move people to vote in a very specific pattern. There should be some chaos, some random. And so we'll kind of wrap this up with North Carolina. Same concerns here. This is Mecklenburg. This is Charlotte. And same concerns. We're seeing higher turnout benefiting the winning candidate, in this case, the Republican candidate. So, and here's North Carolina as a whole. Instead of that more circular pattern, we are seeing pretty much a reverse comet trail, which is the same concern. We're seeing a correlation. Higher turnout, more votes for the Republican Party. So we'll wrap up there. Last thing then is, if this is caused by a compromise of the tabulation machines, as we've been worried about, as Smart Elections has highlighted in some of their work looking at how our machines are audited with Pro V&V, which is an auditing company with some interesting ties that we may talk about in the future, we may publish in the future. What's interesting is, if the drop-off is caused by a manipulation of our elections, if this higher turnout benefiting one candidate is caused by a manipulation of our elections, where else is it occurring? And can we quantify it? And so as we said, we talked about, if Pennsylvania is caused by manipulation, it is enough to change the outcome in Pennsylvania for the presidential race. It is enough to change the outcome of North Carolina for the presidential race. We've also looked at Arizona, for Wisconsin as well. And it would be enough to change the outcome of those places as well. So as we highlight this as our summary slide, if all of those states were impacted and those higher estimates were anomalous votes, and as we push forward for audits and looking and investigating how our machines are actually running our elections, if those states were changed, would it be enough to change the outcome of the presidential race as a whole? So we talked about Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Arizona, and Wisconsin. That would be enough to change the Electoral College. And I think that would put Harris somewhere closer to 288 electoral votes, which would change. That would change the presidential election.
Yeah, as you say, Arizona, at least 118,620 anomalous votes. That would change the outcome. Wisconsin, same category with just about a little over 20,000. That would change the outcome. And then these are the swing states. This is why when you look at him running the table, Donald Trump, the way he did on those swing states, by outside the margin of error or the recount margin in this case, just what you're saying is it falls into the statistically anomalous category.
It warrants further investigation. Yep, and we could take this PowerPoint down. I think we can kind of summarize. I think that covers everything I wanted to talk about today, and I appreciate you kind of.
I know we really move you along here, so I appreciate you sort of moving along what is typically a far more detailed explanation. But I thought that in covering the lawsuits, in covering the software, you kind of get at it. The thing that's been talked about a lot, and we'll just spend maybe our last 90 seconds or so on this, is the idea that is the methodology, is how it could happen. Okay, like if you point out the statistic outlier nature of these various returns, how was it done? Was it done? And I think the implication, based on what you've said, is that the technology of these machines had been compromised, and that with that compromised technology, then came an ability to manipulate the outcome.
So we don't truly know, but we are starting to find common factors across these states and across these machines. We still pretty heavily think that it could be a compromise of the tabulation system that every state uses. And as I said, 2 to 3 major brands. How would you have done this, right? Well, we're not exactly sure. There is some difference between some of these brands. Some of them have cellular modems in them. Some of them should not or do not. So what's even more terrifying as we dive deeper is this wouldn't be easy to pull off. This would require a good amount of planning, a good amount of power and effort and connections to do it.
And they have to work in concert with each other, don't they?
It would require, It would require having some people with some serious knowledge, some serious power, and a lot of cybersecurity expertise, really, to compromise the machines. I will highlight, as we talked about with Smart Elections, some of the work they've been doing. They have shown if you were to compromise some of the auditing companies that work with these machines and come in and certify them, that would be an avenue to introduce malware if you were to compromise the vendors themselves. We don't truly know. And the only way we're going to know, right, is if we get recounts, if we demand investigations, if we keep making this known and public, and we do what Smart Elections is doing, which the ETA is looking at trying to move forward legal action here in the near future in Pennsylvania, perhaps. But that's the only way we're really going to get answers, is if we keep talking about it, we keep digging, and we keep fighting.
We're on the same page. When people ask, well, what can we do about it? This is what we're doing about it. We're talking about it. We're getting it out there, and it has to get out there. And of course, the irony of this is that Donald Trump has ordered an investigation from his Justice Department on the 2020 election that he feels Biden did not win. So if we can have the investigation on that, you'd think we could rally one on this. Nathan, I've got to run. I so appreciate always the information. I think it can appear dense, but if you actually go through it, you present it quite manageably, and I'm really grateful for that. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, Nathan Taylor, Election Truth Alliance. Thanks, my friend. We'll have a link to your website, to Election Truth Alliance.
Thank you so much. You have a good one.
Yep, you too. You too.
The Mark Thompson Show.
So happy he's back from vacation. Pulitzer Prize winner, co-founder of DCReport.org, also a prolific writer, best-selling author. How about it for the professor, David Cay Johnson? Hello, sir.
Well, good to be with you again, Mark.
I mean, it was the vacation of Kim and I were joking. It was like it was a civil right. All these civil rights sites, I think, at which many atrocities were perpetrated. Right.
Right. Yes. The lynching museum in particular, which is quite powerful and disturbing. It was not a comfortable 4 days. We spent 4.5 days driving about 900 miles around Alabama and Mississippi, but it certainly was informing. Among other things, the only white people we met were from the North. one of the museums, I think we were the only people there all day.
Well, we're getting rid of all those museums, David, because
Yeah.
that's the part of American history we want to dry clean out.
Right.
But
Because the enslaved people were happier back then.
well, because America's great, and let's emphasize the greatness is the rap I hear. I want to get your thoughts just quickly on this Senate bill that was dragged across the finish line, with particular attention to the way in which the billionaire class, and you've written about the elite class in your writings in the past and how they take advantage of the tax system already, are again given a big fat favor from this administration.
Yeah, and it's been astonishing to watch a number of independent bloggers stop people who are wearing Trump regalia and interview them about the bill. Clearly, they have no clue to what's in it. The simple fact is that the U.S. economy has done terrifically for almost 50 years now, but the bottom 90% of workers have gone essentially nowhere. And this bill simply reduces further the burdens on people, some of whom make multiple billion-dollar annual incomes. Think about that. Not wealth of being a billionaire, but annual incomes in the billions of dollars. And it's going to hurt you even if you're comfortable, because by cutting Medicaid as severely as this is going to happen, your 2027 health insurance premiums are going to go up. I will not be surprised if they go up somewhere between 15 and 25% to make up for the Medicaid revenue that won't be flowing to hospitals. If you live in a rural area, you probably are going to lose your hospital. And all of this so that people who can't spend in a lifetime what they make in 1 year can pay less in taxes. This is it's despicable. And I think that the Republican senators who voted for this, particularly the ones who were critical of it, Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, used her vote this past 51-50 to extract all sorts of extraordinary favors for Alaska. But she did so at the expense of all the other states. And the chickens will come home to roost about this. And here, one little number to keep in mind. When I wrote my books, Perfectly Legal, Free Lunch, and The Fine Print, I had back of the envelope sort of estimates of how money is being redistributed upward. The Rand Corporation in Santa Monica, which started out 75 years ago as a think tank created by Boeing and the Air Force, did the kind of study Rand has the capability of doing. And they concluded that over what's roughly the last 50 years, $50 trillion was redistributed through government upward to the top 10th of 1%. 50 trillion, it's $1 trillion a year on average. I mean, obviously it's heavily loaded to the most recent years. But the reason so many people are struggling, the reason so many people are worried about paying their rent, the reason so many people are in debt is because government has created this massive welfare system, not just for corporations, which is a lot of what I've written about, but for very wealthy people who control corporations. And they're the ones who don't need subsidies.
But for those reasons, they, of course, get additional subsidies. They have so much control over our political system, which is awash in money.
Well, I once had a New York State senator with whom I shared a cab into Manhattan from LaGuardia Airport when I used to commute to work in New York by plane once a week, at least when I went to New York. And he said to me something I thought was very fascinating. And he's from a billionaire family. He's not a billionaire, but the family are. He said, you know, every morning when I'm shaving, I think about my 10 biggest donors and what they want, and how I have to indicate to them I'm trying to get it for them, even though in many cases they would be worse off if they got it. It's really not good for them. They just think it is. And I've got to demonstrate to them I'm trying to do it, or they'll just fund somebody else.
Wow.
Okay. But then he said the important part. He said, you know, I don't recall one time in the last 10 years, that's how long you've been in the New York State Senate. I don't recall one time in the last 10 years that I stood there shaving and thought about what should I be doing today for my average constituent. And he's a Democrat.
Wow.
And I mean, the real constituents of people in Congress are the donor class. The liberal reforms brought about by Common Cause and others, and that I played a role in getting made into law in Michigan by the way we intensely reported the campaign finance reform bills. My boss and I were accused by a Republican state senator of journalism by terrorism because we reported everything. If you showed up late for a committee hearing, you went on the front page of the paper. If as one state senator did, you walked into the room, put your hand in your palm and started snoring, we reported that. And so they passed these tough bills, and they all have turned out to be a disaster. And then you add the Supreme Court decisions, 3 of them, the last of which is Citizens United, and you end up with what we have today, which is a Congress that has been thoroughly rented by the donor class.
And you have now a chief executive who is completely for sale as well. And so you end up with an entire system wall to wall that is completely gutted of anything really for the constituents and more, as you say, for the donor class. The sad environmental stuff that's buried in there, incentives to develop alternative energies, which really do show promise all around the world, they are gone.
Well, the cheapest electricity now, Mark, is solar followed by wind. Even if you strip away the existing subsidies that the Republicans are about to get rid of, it's still the cheapest form of electricity. So it's very simple. What Donald Trump and the Republicans are doing is they're voting to raise prices for energy.
Well, it's exactly that. And it's also likely to, at a time when the grid is being pressured in ways that reflect climate change. These temperatures, even today, across America are hotter and at record levels. There's more and more of a pressure on that electric grid, which has fewer and fewer sources of energy if you're taking away the alternative energy, which they are.
And there's another element to this, and that is as we build new transmission lines. Transmission line is a monopoly right of way. Typically, utility companies are allowed to earn a rate of return on their assets of about 10%, 10 and a quarter, maybe 10 and a half, 10%. Since they're usually half equity and half borrowed money, it really means they're earning about 15% on their equity, 12.5 to 15%, depending on their structure and costs. The federal government is approving transmission lines with 16% rates of return, which is just a ripoff of customers. There's no need to pay 16% to get someone to build a high-tension power line. That's absurd. It's a monopoly once you've got it. And what you're seeing is a on steroids effort now to mine the American people and empty their pockets, conveying that money to the super rich.
The monopoly that you talk about, particularly when it pertains to energy, is sort of understood. Like in California, we have that. It's granted such that you're not going to have competition. That's the deal that we make with you as the state, because we know it's going to be really costly for you to set up all these wires and set up all, the infrastructure. But the trade-off is that we're going to have to approve all of your rates, that you're essentially going to have to work in conjunction with the state. The only problem is the regulators are pretty much in the pocket of all of those providers.
Well, the last time I checked the California Public Utilities Commission, which I covered in the late 70s and early 80s for the LA Times, there were no consumer advocates there at all. And there weren't even sort of disinterested citizens, economically disinterested. They were all people who had a vested interest in the utility companies. I've written at length about the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which deals with everything from the height water can be behind hydroelectric dams, you'd care a lot about if you own waterfront property, or live downstream of the dam, should it fail, like in Johnstown, Pennsylvania over 100 years ago, to the rates of return on interstate transmission lines. And that organization was so deeply in the pocket that I referred to the former chairwoman who came from one of the big utilities and went back to the big utilities as a sightless sheriff. Essentially, if she were on the vice squad and was sent to a bordello to check it out so the cops could raid the place, she would be the person who would report back and say, well, I went to this house and there were these men in suits and women standing around in lingerie, but I didn't see anything illegal going on.
Right. I'm shocked to know that there's gambling going on in my establishment.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. But I'm going to pivot. The coalition around Donald Trump has hardened. The word is out that the strong man knows what he wants, and you get situations like Tillis on the floor of the Senate talking about the fact that he doesn't want to take on the Trump machine. So that's the implication. And here he was making remarks last night. Go ahead.
Withholding my vote. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, I want to guess.
Okay, well, that was.
It's opposed by.
I want to get the top of that. Oh, well, I thought we had it. We didn't.
Well, Tillis basically announced he's not running again because in a primary, he'll get wiped out in North Carolina.
Sure.
Even though he's the one who's standing there for some principles and for the welfare of 661,000 people in North Carolina, which, if I recall, only has about 8 million residents. Fewer than
he was essentially saying that our constituents are being sold out by this thing. Yeah. We'll take one more crack at it. I want you to hear what he had to say.
So what do I tell 663,000 people in 2 years or 3 years when President Trump breaks his promise by pushing them off of Medicaid? Now Republicans are about to make a mistake on health care and betraying a promise. It is inescapable that this bill in its current form will betray the very promise that Donald J. Trump made. You supporting the Senate mark will hurt people who are eligible and qualified for Medicaid. I will be withholding my vote. Thank you, Mr. President.
So there you have it, David. But as you say, he just didn't want to go up against the Trump machine. And there are those who are breaking away, but they're not breaking away with dissent to the president as they remain in office. They're breaking away with dissent as they say, hey, I'm tapping out. I don't want any more of this.
Right. And I would argue that's sort of a form of voluntary obedience. And if there's anything that we are warned by Professor Timothy Snyder, who's a great expert on authoritarianism, not to do. Rule number one, do not voluntarily obey. But that's what you're seeing, people walking away. And the original coward here was Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney's religion teaches that one day the Constitution will hang as if by a thread, and a member of the priesthood shall step forward and save the nation. And Romney could have done a lot. He said the right thing sort of now and then, but just like Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, at the end of the day, he folds.
It's performative with these people. I also want to pivot just because your work with Trump and your knowledge of Trump is so great. Here is Trump talking about something, and this pertains to the Iran thing. It happened while you were away, but I know that you caught it because I think you dropped me an email on it. And this is Donald Trump actually remarking on the fact, this is at the NATO summit. He's remarking on the fact that the Iranians had tipped him off and that he greenlit, in essentially so many words, the attack on an American Air Force base. Go ahead, Tony.
Made in America, because we have the best hardware in the world. You saw that where 14 missiles were shot at us the other day. And they were very nice. They gave us warning. They said, we're going to shoot them. Is 1 o'clock okay? They said, it's fine. And everybody was emptied off the base, so they couldn't get hurt except for the gunners. They call them the gunners. And out of 14 high-end missiles that were shot at the base in Qatar, all 14, as you know, were shot down by our equipment. Amazing stuff.
Okay, so
Amazing
David,
that they can do
that is something that really does jump out at you.
Well, first of all, let's not be naive about this. This is how these things work. When Trump decided early in his first term he was going to hit a Russian airbase in Syria, our Pentagon called up their military and said, hey, we're going to bomb this place, and here's when it's going to happen. And so they flew the planes away, and everybody got in Jeeps or their Russian equivalent and left. So it isn't that we don't do things like that. But imagine if that person standing there and saying this had been Joe Biden, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, the Jimmy Carter, the Republicans would have gone crazy with this, and it would have been reported as page one news and made all three networks. And the reason I sent the link to that clip to you is the only place I found it reported was in one of the minor, news sites that's very, very focused on some leftist sort of ideology about it. And that's only because I don't read it, somebody sent that to me. But it's part of the problem.
But let me just get clear. What's problematic about it is that he says the quiet part out loud. He says the part where it's understood that this happens, that there's a performative aspect to save face. We have to send missiles over. We're going to send them over at 1:00. But your point is you don't talk about that publicly as a president of the United States.
And remember, during the first term, when Mark Milley spoke with General, I think it was a Chinese general, because Trump had made some very bellicose remarks that had China very upset. He called him and said, "Don't worry about it. That's just talk. Nothing's going to happen." And Trump immediately started claiming this was treasonous. The world works the way the world works. So on one hand, what Trump said is sort of not news, but boy, if you think about the built-in sort of inability of the press to grasp who Donald Trump is and to write about him. Yesterday, I watched the new Robert De Niro film that's on HBO about Frank Costello and Vito Genovese. And
sure.
De Niro plays both roles very brilliantly, and he doesn't look like the same person. They made him up very well. And one of the things that comes away from that was how much the American mobsters played the press. Reporters who they didn't, they took the quotes they got from people, but they didn't know enough of them how to dig deeper. There's always been in this country some really great mob reporters, but the overall tenor of the coverage is as we're seeing with Trump. There's some really great coverage, and then there's a whole lot of unbelievably thoughtless, failing to recognize who and what he is coverage.
Well, I also think there's sort of this, the White House says that the new administration will produce this many, and it's just like almost a stenographer kind of job now instead of a real reporting. But now let me just be fair to broadcasters, media, journalists, et cetera. They've been cowed. I mean, they I think in large measure, their parent organizations have told them, hey, back off. We don't want to get into a pissing match with the President of the United States.
Well, and absolutely. And for instance, if you're Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong, who owns the LA Times, your $10 or so billion fortune doesn't come from the LA Times. That's losing $1 million a week on you out of your pocket. It comes from drugs, and you need approvals from the FDA. So he has a powerful incentive to, align himself with the administration.
I love that you mentioned the LA Times, because it does seem as though what they've done is they've kind of concentrated their coverage more locally on California, which is a fair way to go. I mean, in a way, it's better than soft pedaling Trump. I wanted to quickly, David, in our limited time, I want to ask you about something. This is a Justice Department memo that is really staggering. The Trump administration intending to ramp up denaturalizations and broaden the criteria that's used to determine if a naturalized citizen's citizenship could be stripped away. Now, this is...
As I read the memo, it might be done even for civil rather than criminal matters. So you become a U.S. citizen and there's some minor criminal charge against you. Trump wants the Justice Department to start the process of taking away your citizenship as a naturalized citizen and then throw you out of the country. And Trump is like, we're going to get rid of all these people. Fundamentally, it's going to damage the economy. We're already seeing in the case of the raids on the farms and fields, it's harder to find some fresh grocery products, and prices have been marked up on a number of them. Not a lot, but some. This is all part of Donald's core campaign, which is make America white again and make sure it's male dominated. And he's going to keep going as long as Congress lets him.
The building of these detention camps, they're really concentration camps. There's one going up, I think, in the Alligator Alcatraz. They're selling merch.
Alligator Auschwitz might be a better name.
Oh, that's exactly it. Right. And you know, they're selling merch with it. Kim had the merch story. I mean, it's so grotesque. It's crazy. But they literally have hats and shirts that say Alligator Alcatraz. Anyway, there's that, and then there are other, I guess, facilities going up, and they're going up all over the country. I wonder if you can give me a beat on this, because this does involve, you know, a zeal about getting all of these. It's primarily Latinos. It seems to me that they've singled out the Latino community, but now I see the Iranian community in Los Angeles also included. It seems that zeal is being applied in a really aggressive fashion.
If you drive the Cross Florida Highway near Miami and you're an 18-wheeler, and I only know this because one of my sons used to be an 18-wheeler driver, and you look down, you will just see alligators, so many you would imagine you could walk across their backs for miles. And there's an abandoned airstrip in the Everglades with all these alligators. They've put up tents. They do have some level of air conditioning, not that it would be very efficient with tents. What happens when a hurricane with 200-mile-an-hour winds comes bearing down on those tents? People are going to die. And Trump doesn't care. I mean, he doesn't care about anybody. He has no empathy at all. But yeah, there's an image on the screen, those of you who are watching online. And this is a terrible, terrible way to treat people. What they're hoping is it'll have two effects. One is that people who have been captured will say, I'm going to stop fighting just to put me on a plane and get me out of here. And the other is that people won't come into the U.S. And people, I guess the third effect, which is people who are here will self-deport.
Right. And that self-deport.
But all of this is reflective of nothing more than the racism and misogyny of the Trump administration. And at the core of this, how is it that Trump is not more unpopular? Well, these interviews I mentioned that I've seen with video bloggers online, it's very clear that a whole lot of Trump supporters live in a universe that has no relationship to facts. They presumably are, if they're getting any news at all, it's from places like Breitbart and One News America and maybe Fox. There was a woman with a Trump girl shirt on in one of these who went on and on and on about how under Biden, our taxes went up and the tax policy was just horrible. And she goes on, and the guy finally says, well, you do realize that's the Donald Trump tax law that was enacted during his term and is still in effect. You're a liar. And other people going, you're a liar. There's no, you really are dealing with a cult. There's no getting through this belief system that has nothing to do with the real world. And the longer Trump is in office and the more successful these other outfits are convincing people of nonsense, the more difficult it's going to be to get ourselves out of this hole, and the less likely that our democracy will survive Donald Trump.
You know, David, it just seems to me that the complete capture of government is something that he's been successful at doing. And one of the things I heard him, I was watching him, and they called it a roundtable. It was sort of the discussion of this Alligator Alcatraz place, and DeSantis was there. This is at Mar-a-Lago. And anyway, he talked about the fact that, because he was asked about Medicaid, he said Medicaid cuts, if they happen, that would be the fault of Democrats. He said that the Democrats have been looking at cutting Medicaid, and a lot of their programs are the reason that Medicaid would have to be cut. So if there are any cuts to Medicaid, it's the Democrats' fault. And I thought, oh, wow, so that's the plan. It's to cut it, but it's to blame the Democrats. And if he says it enough, David, as you know, those people to whom you've referred, they all regurgitate it.
The big lie works. The idea that the Democrats are want to get rid of Medicaid is hilarious. On the other hand, there are people on the left who are screwing this up by not being factual. There's a meme going around right now about how FDR got us Medicaid. I'm sorry, Medicaid came in 1965. FDR had been dead for 20 years at that point. People who are in the center or on the left, people who are not MAGA, they really need to be careful to show respect for facts. There's a meme right now that I wrote about on my Facebook page, which is open for anybody, facebook.com/David Cay, one word. This is a iron bar, 1,000 grams. It costs $100. Well, first of all, 1,000 grams of steel, 2.2 pounds, costs less than $1. Number one. Then it says you could turn this into $250 with horseshoes. Well, horseshoes often weigh 2 pounds. And even if you add they cost 10 to 14 bucks if you're buying them retail. If you add the cost of a farrier, somebody said, oh, it'd make it easily worth $250. No, I'm sorry, I've owned horses. I never paid, even when you inflation adjust, $250 to put one horseshoe on one hoof of a horse. And then if you do the next thing, you'll be worth $70,000 and then millions of dollars. And it's utter and complete nonsense that tells us we are losing critical thinking skills. We're losing the most incredibly basic arithmetic skills. You know, how many people know what 1,000 grams means, that it's 2.2 pounds? Frankly, not a lot. It's very clear from some answers I've seen posted, because I went looking for these and put retorts to them, that some people think that's like 1,000 pounds or a ton.
Yeah, there's a lot of information out here, and frankly, you're right. It's never cross-referenced. It's just picked up off of social, and we run with it. But you make a really good point, which is that the left and even centrists, people who have righteous arguments, need to be true to the facts.
Well, and principled Republicans, and Tillis is to some degree establishing that he has principles.
Right, exactly.
And we should, don't.
And Murkowski and Collins are establishing the opposite. Yeah.
It's a big mistake. All Republicans are evil, all terrible. No, you want to encourage people who have principles. I couldn't stand my father-in-law's principles. He was a premier, perhaps premier school desegregation lawyer in America in the 60s for the losing side.
Oh, wow.
But he also came to this through a belief system rooted historically that concerned him. If he were alive today, my father-in-law, who died almost 30 years ago, would be tearing his hair out over Donald Trump and saying, what is wrong with you people? This is not principled. This is not honest. So even if you disagree with people, if they're principled, respect that they are principled and encourage people to be principled.
Yeah, those are the discussions we're going to have. David, thanks. We're out of time. Love our visits. Glad you're back. David Cay Johnson, everyone. See you next week. All right, my friend.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I want to quickly share with you, first of all, thank you for being here. Thanks for all the support. Thanks for all the thumbs up. That does help us in the world of YouTube. And we have a conversation with a brilliant author and researcher about her new book, The Teacher of Auschwitz. It's really good. I hope you'll hang out for it. I'm going to run to KFI Radio in Los Angeles. I have to do an air shift there, but I'm excited about sharing this with you. Thanks to Kim and Tony and all of you. And check this out. Wendy Holden is brilliant, and this story is compelling. Check it out.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I'm really looking forward to talking to this author who has such a body of work. Just reading about some of the work that she's been involved in, one can't help but be impressed by someone who does such meticulous work and research, and rigorous research at that, when it comes to producing biographies and journalism through the years. She's a journalist for 18 years now, including a decade at the Daily Telegraph, author and co-author of more than 30 books, and among them, several internationally acclaimed wartime biographies, including Born Survivors. She did the New York Times bestsellers, A Lotus Grows in the Mud. That was the Goldie Hawn biography. She also did a biography of Frank Sinatra's widow, Barbara, Lady Blue Eyes, that was called. And she joins us today because she has a new piece, The Teacher of Auschwitz, a novel, but it's a historical novel, and so it's set in Auschwitz. And this is what I want to get clear from her, how much of it is historical stuff that she has researched. I mean, that is her thing, this kind of research. And then what's grown out of that research to create this novel. Please welcome the quite prolific and brilliant Wendy Holden, everyone. Hi there, Wendy.
Hi, Mark. What an intro. Thank you very much indeed. I'd like to come on your show every week.
Well, you have an intimidating body of work. Congratulations, and congratulations on the new novel. The Holocaust is just such a it's such a dark shadow over civilization. I just am so moved even when I think about it, honestly. And so to find anything in the Holocaust at Auschwitz, this sort of maybe one of the darkest shadows over this concentration camp, that you found something there that you could mine for a story, and a compelling story at that. I want to hear about what you did and how much of this is based on research you did that turns out to actually reflect life at Auschwitz and this story as well.
Yes, exactly. Well, I'm a historian, really. I mean, that's my passion, and war in particular. I'm a fellow of the Royal Historical Society in England, and I actually intended initially to write this as a non-fiction biography of this remarkable young man, Freddie Hirsch. But as the research went on and I dug deeper and deeper, I realized that the archive material was running out. There just wasn't enough material. And part of the reason was that after the war and the 80 years since the war, he'd been largely forgotten and indeed denigrated by the communists for all sorts of reasons which weren't valid. And so the archive material, if there had been any, wasn't available. It may have been destroyed. So I switched from non-fiction to fiction. I have written fiction previously, and I was always determined to be true to the facts, however. And I was very rigorous in my research, and even the fictional characters I made up are individually based on snippets of information from the archives.
The book is a look inside this Nazi death camp, Auschwitz. But again, you've sort of referenced this guy, this 27-year-old man who became a protector to kids at Auschwitz. It's funny, I'll just step out and ask you, I always assume Auschwitz has got one of the shortest lifespans associated with those who are there. I mean, that it's not like a place where the kids are going to grow up and then they're going to be protected by this guy. Hey, everything's happening fast and you're all going to end up dead. I mean, that's the way I imagine Auschwitz. So yet he did on some level protect these kids or educate these kids. And this is what you describe in your book.
Yes, well, it was a very exceptional situation because Freddie and the children were put into a special camp known as the Czech family camp. And there was only one chilling reason for that camp in existence. It was because the Red Cross were starting to suspect that terrible things were happening under Nazi control to Jews in particular, but to a whole lot of other people as well. And they were threatening to come and visit. And in fact, they had already visited the ghetto where Freddie had been imprisoned for a number of years prior. And the fear was that they would come to Auschwitz. So the Nazis decided to keep a group of people together, several thousand people together, who had come from this ghetto in Terezin to Auschwitz, and keep them, not shave their heads, allow them to wear their clothing, allow them to mingle, to be together in this family camp, just in case the Red Cross came. And of course, that is where Freddie was able to persuade the SS to allow him a dedicated children's block, and he was able to create this little piece of heaven and hell.
A wild fact out of Auschwitz, isn't it?
In the shadow of the chimneys, literally in the shadow of the chimneys, they sang, they danced, they played, and he built a wall against suffering in their hearts.
So this man also interesting in himself. He was a gay man, yes?
Yes, he was the son of a master butcher. He'd grown up in Aachen in Germany. He was Jewish but assimilated. The family was assimilated. I think he was aware of his sexuality only in his teens and very much in denial. His father died young, which was devastating for him, and he sought solace in the Scout movement and in outdoor activities. He loved being in nature and he loved outdoor activities. And to his great surprise, he discovered that he was a natural mentor to younger children, that they looked up to him. He was very beautiful. He was a very keen athlete and he hoped to become an Olympian. Of course, that privilege was denied him by Hitler because no Jews were allowed to be on the German team. But he really took on board the whole idea of what we now think of, nature and meditation and all the extraordinary things that we now rely on to keep ourselves stress-free. He used those techniques even back then with the children all the way through his life.
And it's extraordinary that he was able to impart all of this and somehow lead these kids to a more peaceful place, at least emotionally, mentally, as you say, in the shadow of the smokestacks.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how did you become aware of this extraordinary story?
I'd written a previous book with a Holocaust survivor called Zuzana Ruzicova, and she was a Czech musician, aged 90. She was living in Prague. I left her on the Friday, having finished all my research, and she died on the Tuesday. So it was an incredible privilege, as it always is, to chronicle these remarkable stories. Her family told me that she stayed alive long enough to tell me her story. That was her wish. Now, the thing about her was that she'd lost pretty much everybody except her mother, and obviously her story was incredibly harrowing. But on her desk in her office were 3 photographs. One was her beloved father who died in the ghetto, one was her mother who was long dead, and the other was this beautiful young man, and his name was Freddie Hirsch. And even through all the things she was telling me about, all the sorrows and the grief and the hardship and the terrible things she suffered during the camps, every time she mentioned Freddie, it was as if a light went on inside her. She lit up. And I realized to my shock that he had given her actually some of the happiest moments of her entire life in the middle of Auschwitz and in the ghetto. And I had just had to find out more about him after that.
What does that research look like? How do you start?
Well, to a certain extent by now, Mark, I'm plagiarizing my own brain. I've been to so many of the camps and I've got great historical records. I've got a whole room full of books on the Holocaust and World War II. So from that perspective, it was easier for me than it would be somebody coming to it from the start. But I have wonderful contacts at the USHMM and in other European and British museums and archives. So it was really just a question of being allowed permission to go in and look for his name and look for testimonies on the Shoah Foundation website that for people who had known him, the children that had survived, who talked about him in exactly the same way Zuzana did, with great joy and love in their hearts.
I don't want to give away anything. So there is a quality of hope you always have when talking about those involved in these camps, etc. I mean, as prisoners. And so discuss in whatever way you want to without, any spoilers, because, I mean, again, it's a dark setting, but it's a beautiful story. And all of us are hoping that everyone in these camps can walk away or survive long enough for the Allies to free them. Give me some sense of that struggle amidst the overall light that Freddie was giving these kids in the darkness of Auschwitz.
Absolutely. Well, prior to this kind of work, I was a foreign and war correspondent, and as a journalist, I was always looking for the humanity and the inhumanity. And there is so much humanity in this book, no matter the setting, no matter the outcome, no matter what happened for a lot of the people mentioned in the book. There was always this incredible spark of humanity and hope. They say hope is the last thing to die, and that's certainly true here. The kindness and the courage of people who refused, like Freddie, to be bystanders to hate, to be bystanders to evil, who defied the Nazis every single day, who stood up to Adolf Eichmann and to Joseph Mengele to demand better provisions for the children, who persuaded an artist to paint Disney characters on the walls of this barrack in the middle of Auschwitz. And they looked up at Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs every day. They even put on a musical of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and all the children wanted to take part. So instead of just a handful of dwarves, there were scores of them. and Freddie made them costumes out of rags and cardboard. I mean, they played and they laughed and they sang. And that expression that I used earlier on, he built a wall against suffering in their hearts, was actually used by one of the survivors. They really did regard him as a spiritual and moral leader. He was extremely strict with them. He was determined that they shouldn't die from vermin, from disease. So he made them clean themselves very thoroughly. He made them roll in the snow in the winter, even though it was so cold, just to try and get rid of the vermin. And he did everything in his power to not only keep them alive, but instill in them a sense of positivity and hope.
Absolutely extraordinary. As you look back on Chronicles of the Holocaust, of which you, as you say, have produced many yourself, and you look at the way the Holocaust is discussed now, I always worry that the varnishing of a lot of detail, the reconstituting of a lot of history, can lead people off the actual trail of what happened. I mean, they're Holocaust deniers. There's sort of a sense that this could never be forgotten and never be repeated. And of course, now both those things are happening, in my judgment.
Yes, unfortunately, all the survivors are dying. They're just got to the age now where they're not staying with us anymore. Born survivors did tell the story of 3 young mothers who hid their pregnancies from the Nazis and gave birth in the camps. And those 3 babies are still alive. They were all 80 in April, and I've traveled back to the camp where they were liberated by the Americans with them last month. And they're incredibly vital, wonderful people. And traveling with them and talking to people, particularly to the next generation, to school children, which is a big part of my work, is so important, because they can't identify with 6 million, but they can identify with 3 young mothers or 3 young babies or somebody like Freddie Hirsch. But to see somebody in the flesh who Hitler intended to kill disproves any denials. And that's the most marvelous thing about it. The difficulty, as you quite rightly say, is that as those people diminish and dwindle and fall away, we are left with a body of work which nobody can stand up and put a hand on their heart and say, this definitely happened, which is all the more reason, I think, why these stories continually need to be told and retold in whichever way they can. I'm very, very aware that I have fictionalized part of this story, and it is really just part of the story. But I had to do it to bring the whole story to the readers. I had to let everybody get inside Freddie's skin to understand who he was as a person and what drove him, a boy with an ordinary childhood, an unhappy childhood, actually, who ended up becoming this incredible human being. And I wanted people to take inspiration from that and realize that they too can stand up to hate.
Well, the essential details of this story are true, and the place, the setting, and all those details associated with the place and the setting, those are all true. I mean, if there was no one, or I should say, you're certainly among the most qualified people to set that scene for us and give us the detail and the texture of what they were dealing with. The book is The Teacher of Auschwitz. It's a novel from Wendy Holden, and Wendy's website is wendyholden.com. And there you can get more details. I think you can order the book. We'll have a link to the book and to Wendy's website under this video. Wendy, what an honor to speak with you. Congratulations on this. It's, what an undertaking. You're so very prolific. And as I say, just a pleasure to have a conversation with you today.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
All the best to you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Hey, which one of you is Mark Thompson?
Who's Mark Thompson?
The Mark Thompson Show.
So as Mark steps out to KFI, we have Jefferson Graham coming in. It is Tech Tuesday, and it wouldn't be Tuesday without him. So let's move right forward. Jefferson Graham, he is a former USA Today technology columnist, and now he is the host of Photo Walks TV, and he joins us every Tuesday to talk about the latest gadgets and tech stories that we have. Hi, Jefferson.
Hi. Most Tuesdays anyway. You hear me, right? We have sound?
Yeah, you sound
okay,
great.
Good.
Yeah,
yeah. Most Tuesdays, because as you know, I've been on the road.
You have been on the road. Where was the most recent trip?
Chicago, Detroit, Columbus, Cincinnati, and Cleveland.
Oh,
That was in 2
wow.
weeks.
Okay,
Yeah.
that sounds great. So that we can look forward to that coming up
The
on
first
Photo Walks
episode
TV.
will be out this Sunday from Cleveland, where most people don't realize, but the Superman character was created in the 1930s in Cleveland, Ohio, by
Oh.
two young teenagers who went to high school in Cleveland. And it was the first superhero ever created. And there's a new Superman movie coming out on the 11th. And for the very first time, a Superman movie was filmed in Cleveland.
Would you say Cleveland is worth visiting?
Cleveland is a beautiful city, amazing downtown. They've lost 2/3 of their population since the 70s.
Oh, wow.
And it's bouncing back. It's gorgeous. I wouldn't recommend July and August. I would recommend the fall and the spring. It was hotter than I'm accustomed to feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, let's move to tech because there's some changes coming to Siri, and it looks like Apple might be shuffling the code for Siri out the door.
Apple might be outsourcing their personal assistant to the smart people who do it really well at ChatGPT. Just to remember, everybody, the Siri personal assistant came out in 2011 and has been criticized ever since as not being that great. It's actually better than most people think, but it's not as good as ChatGPT. ChatGPT has their act together and has been giving Google a real run for their money. And Apple, a year ago, June 2024, announced an all-new, smarter, chattier Siri that would be out with the new iPhone, the 16, and that didn't happen. They couldn't get it together. And then they said it would be out later in the year. Didn't happen. Then they said it would be out in 2025. Didn't happen. And at this point, they gave a bunch of interviews recently where they said, we're working on it. We're doing our best. It will get out eventually. And, if they have to outsource this and do it, great. Better that they have a good product than a product that everybody will be attacking. I use ChatGPT more so every day just for little searches that are much more effective. And I don't have to use shorthand because they already know me. And they start off every answer I get is, gee, Jeff, that would be a great place for an episode of Photo Walks, don't you think? So, pretty funny.
Wow. I'm convinced, a side note, that it's the Siri technology on my iPhone that listens to me, because sometimes I will just, like the other day, my husband was talking about fake wood chairs that are kind of plastic. I think they're called polywood. I didn't search for anything. I didn't type anything in. All of a sudden, it pops up on my phone, advertisement after advertisement. So I went in and I tried to turn off Siri listening to me. I don't think I was able to successfully do it.
Yeah, but where were the ads? Were the ads in Facebook?
Yeah, they're all over the place.
But they're not within your Apple iPhone. They're on websites.
On apps, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So weird. Every time we've asked them this question, they swear up and down that they don't listen. They're just so smart. They know what you like, and they know what your peers like, and they just put two and two together.
They're totally listening. You have a July fireworks photo tip to share, because a lot of people will be out, oohing and awing at the fireworks, trying to get pictures of the perfect night sky.
Yes.
And this is one of the things you're really good at. What can you share with us?
I've been doing this every year for like 15 years. Here's tips on how to get great photos of fireworks with your phone. I've got the great photos of the fireworks with my phone, and the big trick is to don't even bother taking pictures of them. Just shoot video. And when you shoot video on your phone, the red button goes on, and then the white shutter button comes on that lets you take pictures while you're shooting video. And you don't have to worry about, am I getting it? Am I not getting it? Because you have the video, you've got the whole thing. And if you want to go in later And if you want to go in and do a frame grab from your video, you could do that by putting the video into your computer using a video editing program, if that's what you want to do. That's what I would do. But there's also an app. I downloaded it today. It's called Frame Grabber. Now, bad news is it's $20 to get. The good news is 3-day free trial. Now, all Mark Thompson show listeners know exactly what I did today when I downloaded the app. Let's hear the first person who could answer what I did. And Kim, you know what I did, don't you?
You downloaded more memory?
No, I downloaded the app.
Did I get it wrong?
I subscribed to it, and immediately I canceled.
Yeah, you're famous for that.
Yeah, immediately canceled, and you still get 3 free days. 3 free days, but you don't have to forget about it. So what I'd recommend to everybody, because I tried it, works great. On July 3rd on Thursday, download the app, use it on Friday, but actually download the app on Thursday, then cancel it immediately, use it on Friday, and then if you're in a situation where you have to do it again, you can make a decision of paying $20 or not. Again, you could do screenshots on your phone, and you could also do frame grabs. You could import it to the computer and do frame grabs that way. So there's many different ways. The main thing is that, I used to have to worry about getting the shot, and now you just don't have to. You just shoot the video. Video looks great, and you can take pictures at the same time. So that is my best tip for getting fireworks shots on your phone.
Sometimes when I try to isolate photo from video, the photo looks fuzzy, but the video didn't.
I had no problem with the fireworks. Yes, it can be that way, but just keep on moving till you'll get something. When I played with this frame grabber this morning, the shots look great.
Where do you go?
All videos are 24, 30 frames, 30 photos that are strung together. So
okay.
You know that, right? Yeah.
No, but I just learned it right now from you.
Yeah.
I was many years old. So where do you usually go to watch the fireworks in your neck of the woods?
It's really interesting. So in the town that I live in Manhattan Beach, California, they have the fireworks in December, not in July. And that's how they do it. They do it for Christmas.
Okay.
We have them in Redondo Beach, which is nearby. I'll bet in Petaluma, they have a little parade with eggs and fireworks.
No,
right?
they don't have a parade, but they do have fireworks. Last year, though, they did laser show. So it'll be interesting to see what they do this year.
Yeah, a lot of people are doing drone shows this year, which are nowhere as photogenic.
Yeah. But it's different. High fire zone. We used to have those little fireworks stands that sold fireworks, and there would be people outside of their houses in the middle of the street setting off fireworks. And we can't do that anymore because this is, this is fire zone now.
This is fire zone, but you know what? It's not as hot as back in the Midwest. I'll just tell you that.
There you go.
Let me plug something real quick,
Please.
Kim. You can watch photo walks on YouTube, but you can also watch it on Scripps News. It's a half-hour TV show on Scripps News now every Sunday at 10. And on Friday, we're doing a marathon. I'm not saying we. Scripps is giving me a marathon from 9 a.m. till whatever 6 hours later is. So it's 6 hours of photo walks back to back, 14 shows.
That's cool. Can we catch that online?
Yeah, it's scripsnews.com. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Jefferson. I appreciate it. Have a great 4th of July.
All right. See you next week.
Bye. Thank you. Jefferson Graham, everybody. There it is. Scripps News. Awesome. Thanks, Tony. Check him out. He's got a marathon going. Nice. We have so many people to thank, Tony. There are so many people crowdfunding this show who want to keep it on and make it successful. And I have a list of people that have jumped in with super chats and super stickers. Chaplain Fred with $5 writes, "There's a special place for people like him, Mark, but it's not up to me to point out Jimmy Swaggart will not be looking up anytime soon." Thank you, Chaplain Fred, and thank you for the contribution as well. Jim Slayton pops in with 5. Californian here celebrating our big, beautiful gas tax increase that went into effect today. There's a reason. This place is fun. or not. Jonah Hollywood coming in with 5. This bill, big beautiful bill, so-called, goes back to the House now, so we'll likely see further changes. Senators, she writes, could vote for it, but not own the ultimate outcome. Yeah, way to duck the responsibility on that. Joan Hollywood, thank you so much. And it was great to see you at the Mark Thompson Show June Swoon meetup. Paulette, budget astrophotographer and counselor, throwing in a 5. Have you ever had Dr. Bandy Lee on your show? You should have her on, Paulette writes. She'll explain what's mentally wrong with not only Trump, but with MAGA. Thanks, Paulette. We have not had her on. Vilma says, Mark, you don't believe Elon has saved the information that Doge obtained? Elon has a wealth of information he can use on Trump. I bet Elon has a lot of information he can use on a lot of people, as he was privy to access to all of our info. Thank you, Vilma, for the $5. Citizen Morgan throwing in a super sticker for 5. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And Eugenia de Arnal with 5. Muchas gracias and mahalo to you for the contribution. We really, really appreciate it. Tomorrow on the Mark Thompson Show, John Rothman will be in to talk politics, and that will be really fun. We are dark on July 3rd and July 4th, and that means we had to move David Katz to Wednesday. David Katz will be in tomorrow to talk about all things legal, latest decisions from the Supreme Court. So David Katz will be in, and Michael Snyder coming in as well. It's a big holiday movie weekend for the 4th of July. So the Culture Blaster coming in, he's got you covered, and it's going to be a great show. That is it for us. Tony, thanks for all the pictures. Thanks for everything.
Oh, yeah, of course. I'm getting ready for July 4th here. It's going to be so much fun.
Absolutely. Are you having a big party?
Family over. We're going to just...
Nice.
If fireworks
Same.
are legal here, we're blowing. Oh, it's going to be great.
And today I cleaned the house to get ready.
For the Mark Thompson Show.
My arcade is done too.
Bye, everybody.
Bye,
Have
everyone.
a great rest of your day. Join me on the after party. It's next.
Link will be in the chat.
Subscribe. Bye. Click like.